There's a question lurking in the back of your mind. It's been there for years, maybe your whole life. You don't think about it often, not directly. It's more like a whisper, a dull, nagging presence. Some nights when you're lying in bed scrolling mindlessly through your phone, even though your eyes are tired and your head hurts, it creeps up on you. Or maybe it slams into you at random, standing in line at the grocery store, sitting in traffic, mid-conversation with a friend, staring at your inbox full of emails that feel both urgent and completely meaningless. It's not a complicated question. It's just one word. Why? Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why does any of this matter? You push the question away like you always do because that's what everyone does. It's too big, too dangerous. You pretend it's not there and get back to work, back to your notifications, back to your distractions. You laugh at a meme. You rewatch a show you've seen 100 times. You buy something you don't need. You move through the motions of life, vaguely aware that something is missing but never fully stopping to name it. But let's not play that game today. Let's stop. Let's confront it. Because that nagging feeling in the back of your mind isn't just your problem. It's our problem. It's humanity's problem. It's a symptom of something massive, something deep, something unraveling at the core of how we live and think and exist. It's called the meaning crisis. And it might just be the most important crisis of our time. The meaning crisis isn't a conspiracy. It's not some vague internet theory. It's a very real, very measurable collapse in the structures that used to hold our world together. For thousands of years, human beings lived inside grand narratives, religion, culture, tradition, shared mythologies. These narratives gave us a sense of direction, of order, of purpose. You weren't just a person floating in the void, you were someone doing something for some reason. You were a believer, a citizen, a worker, a parent, a warrior, a servant of God, a child of history, a tiny piece of something bigger. But then something changed. The world modernized, religion faded, institutions crumbled, old structures lost their power, and suddenly people had to build meaning for themselves. At first this seemed like a victory, a liberation. We broke free from outdated dogma. We weren't trapped by rigid identities anymore. We could be anything. We could live however we wanted. But no one warned us about the other side of that freedom. No one warned us that when everything is possible, nothing feels real. No one warned us that when we stop believing in grand narratives, we would still need something to believe in. And without those beliefs, without those shared truths, we were left with nothing but ourselves. And that's not a weight most people are ready to carry. You can see the meaning crisis everywhere if you know where to look. You can see it in the crushing apathy of a generation that has no future to look forward to. You can see it in the rise of addiction, of suicide, of burnout, of anxiety disorders that are so widespread they no longer even seem unusual. You can see it in the way people distract themselves endlessly. Endless scrolling, endless consumption, endless novelty, anything to keep from sitting in silence and actually facing the emptiness. You can see it in the obsession with self-improvement. The endless cycle of becoming your best self without ever stopping to ask why. People chase productivity and optimization not because they actually want to, but because they're terrified of what happens when they slow down. You can see it in the collapse of trust. Governments, media, science, other people. No one believes in anything anymore. And when you don't trust anything, what do you build your life on? And worst of all, you can see it in the fact that no one is talking about it. People will talk about their anxiety, their burnout, their stress, their lack of motivation, but they won't talk about what's underneath all of that. They won't talk about the void. You might think this isn't new. After all, philosophers have been talking about meaninglessness for centuries. Nietzsche declared God is dead in the 1800s. Existentialists like Camus and Sartre wrestled with absurdity. Buddhism has spent thousands of years examining the illusion of self. But here's what's different. We are not equipped to handle meaninglessness. For thousands of years, we have lived inside structured meaning. Even when philosophers questioned it, the average person didn't need to. Meaning was built in. It was inherited. But in the 21st century, that inheritance is gone. And we were never given the tools to replace it. We were thrown into an infinite, chaotic, hyper-digital world with no guidance, no map, and no instructions. A world where we have too many choices but no direction. A world where we can spend our entire lives consuming but never actually experiencing. We are the first generation raised inside a globalized algorithmic society where every distraction is at our fingertips, and we are paying for it with our sanity. We are the first people in history to be this free and this lost at the same time. and most of us don't even realize it. So that's what this episode is about. Not just identifying the meaning crisis, but feeling it, understanding it, digging into what it means to live in an era where people are drowning in existential dread but don't have the words to describe it. By the end of this episode, I don't expect to give you all the answers. I don't even know if there are answers, but I can give you better questions. What does it actually mean to live a meaningful life in a world that doesn't hand you one? Is meaning something you find or something you create? If religion, tradition, and ideology no longer hold the same power, what can fill that void? And perhaps the hardest question of all, what happens if we don't find an answer? Because here's the thing. The meaning crisis isn't just something happening out there in society. It's not just some abstract philosophical problem. It's personal. It's yours. And the question isn't whether you feel it. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
835 feet.
Let's start with the basic, uncomfortable truth. Most of us never stop to define meaning. We act like we know what it is, like it's something obvious, a thing you just feel, an unspoken force that drives your life. But if I asked you to sit down and write out a definition, what would you say? Would you say meaning is happiness, purpose, fulfillment? Would you say it's found in religion, love, work, helping others? Or would you sit there staring at the blank page, realizing that you don't actually know? This is the part we don't talk about. We assume meaning is something real, something we're supposed to have, something we lost somewhere along the way. But what if we were never clear on what it was in the first place? What if meaning has always been something we borrowed from society, from culture, from religion? And now that those things aren't dictating our lives, we're left with nothing but vague instincts and an existential panic. So before we can talk about the crisis of meaning, we have to get one thing straight. We have to answer the question we've been avoiding. What the hell is meaning anyway? One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking about meaning as one thing. It's not. It's at least 3 different things. 3 levels, 3 dimensions, 3 overlapping but distinct ways we make sense of existence. Let's break them down. First, there's personal meaning. The why of your own life. At the most basic level, meaning is personal. It's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the thing that makes you care, the thing that makes life feel worth living. For some people, this is easy to define. Their meaning comes from relationships, their family, their children, their partner, their friendships. For others, it's achievement. Their career, their art, their pursuit of mastery in something. Some people find meaning in curiosity and the pure joy of learning and experiencing the world. Some people dedicate their lives to service, to helping others, to building a legacy. And some people haven't got a fucking clue. This is where the crisis starts. If you don't have personal meaning, if you wake up and feel like you're just going through the motions, then life starts to feel empty. Days blur together. Nothing feels particularly important. This is why people distract themselves. This is why people consume relentlessly. Media, food, drugs, content, validation. Anything to keep from sitting alone with the feeling that they don't actually know what they're doing. And here's the real kicker. Even if you do have personal meaning, it's fragile. Your job, your relationships, your passions, these things can be taken away. If your meaning is based on something external and that thing disappears, what happens to you? That's the question a lot of people are facing. When you lose the thing that gave you meaning, what's left? Then there's cosmic meaning, the why of existence itself. This is where things get deep. Cosmic meaning is not about what makes your life meaningful. It's about whether life itself means anything. For most of human history, the answer was simple. Yes, life has meaning because there is a bigger plan, a divine force, a moral structure, a universal truth. But in the modern world, that certainty has collapsed. Science tells us we are just accidents of physics, biological machines running on evolutionary programming. The universe doesn't care about us. It wasn't designed for us. It doesn't even know we exist. And when you really sit with that fact, when you let it hit you, it's no surprise that some people spiral into despair. Because if life is just random chaos, if the universe has no inherent purpose, then what are we even doing here? This is where existentialism and absurdism come in. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, and Friedrich Nietzsche realized that if cosmic meaning is gone, we have to create meaning ourselves. But not everyone gets there. Some people get stuck in nihilism. They look at the empty universe and see nothing but pointlessness. This is why the question of cosmic meaning matters. Even if you don't think about it every day, it's the foundation beneath your sense of purpose. If you can't find an answer to it, it affects everything else. Your motivation, your happiness, your ability to engage with life. Next, it's shared meaning, the why of culture and society. The third level of meaning is social. It's the meaning we share, the common values, stories, and beliefs that give structure to our lives. For most of history, this was tied to religion, tradition, and culture. You didn't have to find meaning because it was handed to you. Your role was clear. You were part of a nation, a people, a tribe, a faith. But in the modern world, shared meaning has disintegrated. We don't believe in the same gods. We don't trust the same institutions. We don't even agree on what's real. The internet has fractured reality into a million competing narratives. Instead of one unifying story, we have endless completing microcultures, echo chambers, ideological bubbles, and algorithm-driven thought loops. And when shared meaning collapses, people either retreat into isolation or latch onto something extreme. This is why we're seeing the rise of identity-based politics, conspiracy theories, and cult-like thinking. People aren't just arguing over ideas anymore, they're searching for belonging. They're looking for a tribe, a structure, a cause that makes them feel like they matter. And this isn't just a political problem, it's a philosophical one. Because without shared meaning, we lose something fundamental. We lose the ability to connect with each other on a deep human level. So now we know what meaning is. We know it has three levels: personal, cosmic, and shared. We know that when one of these collapses, people suffer. And right now, all three are collapsing at once. This is why we're in a meaning crisis. People don't just feel lost individually, they feel lost existentially. They feel lost socially. They feel like nothing is real, like the world is fragmented, like they don't belong anywhere, like they're floating in an infinite space with nothing to grab onto. And the scariest part is that most people don't even realize this is what's happening to them. But now you do. So the question is, why is there a crisis now? And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Let's talk about time. There was a moment, maybe you remember it, maybe you don't, when the world felt different. It's hard to put your finger on, like trying to remember a dream that slipped through your fingers the second you woke up. But there was a before and an after. Maybe it was when you realized the job you were working wasn't going to get you anywhere. Maybe it was when politics turned into a never-ending screaming match. Maybe it's when you noticed how much of your life was spent staring at a screen, consuming fragments of other people's lives while feeling like yours was standing still. The meaning crisis didn't happen overnight. It wasn't some grand explosion. It was a slow erosion, a quiet collapse. And now, we're standing in the wreckage, looking around, wondering why nothing makes sense anymore. The question is why now? Because meaningless suffering isn't new. Existential dread isn't new. Philosophers have been screaming about these ideas for centuries. But this is different. This is the first time in human history where the majority of people across cultures and societies feel untethered from anything resembling meaning. Not just spiritually, not just philosophically, but practically, emotionally, daily. Something unique has happened. And let's break down why. Firstly, we need to look at the death of the future. For most of history, people believed in progress. The future was something to move toward, to build, to create. Even in dark times, there was a shared assumption that tomorrow could be better than today. But now the future feels like a dead end. Technology keeps advancing, but life doesn't feel better. Wages stagnate. The cost of living skyrockets. The planet is burning. Wars never end. Political cycles repeat like a bad sitcom that refuses to get cancelled. People aren't dreaming about the future anymore. They're retreating into nostalgia, into distractions. into the safety of what's already familiar. They binge watch the same TV shows, they listen to music from decades ago, they scroll endlessly consuming recycled aesthetics, old trends repackaged as new. And they do this because the future doesn't feel like an adventure anymore. It feels like a threat. We've gone from what will we create next to how much worse is this going to get. And when people stop believing in the future, they stop believing in themselves. They stop making things, they stop taking risks, they stop caring. This is one of the core reasons the meaning crisis is happening now, because meaning isn't just about where we are, it's about where we're going. And right now, most people don't see anywhere to go. Then we have the illusion of infinite choice. Here's a paradox. We've never had more options, but we've also never felt more trapped. We can do anything. We can watch anything, listen to anything, learn anything. We can move across the world, reinvent ourselves, start new careers, create content, build businesses, switch identities. We are, by all measurable standards, freer than any generation before us. So why does that make us feel so empty? Because freedom without direction is paralysis. This is what psychologists call the paradox of choice. When you have too many options, you don't feel more empowered, you feel more overwhelmed. You start second-guessing everything. You feel like no matter what choice you make, there's a better one you're missing. And worse, when everything is possible, nothing feels important. Because meaning comes from commitment. It comes from choosing one thing and going all in. It comes from investing yourself in something greater than yourself. But in a world where every path is available, committing to one feels like shutting the door on all the others. And that is deeply unsettling. So people hesitate. They drift. They become spectators in their own lives, always waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect version of themselves to appear. But unsurprisingly, it never does. Because meaning isn't found in infinite possibility, it's found in deciding. And that's exactly what we're struggling with. Thirdly, we come onto the collapse of shared reality. You felt it. Everyone has. It's harder and harder to talk to people. Not just strangers, friends, family, people you grew up with. It's like we live in different realities, like we're seeing different versions of the same world. That's because we are. The internet was supposed to connect us, but what it really did was fragment reality into a million competing versions. The news you read isn't the news someone else reads. The algorithms show you one version of the world and someone else gets a different one. People used to argue over facts, and now they argue over what's even real. When shared meaning collapses, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, society starts to break down. Not in an obvious, dramatic way, but in a quiet way that makes everything feel unstable. Think about how much of modern life is defined by suspicion. Are they being real, or is this just for clout? Is this a genuine belief or an algorithmic outrage loop? Are they actually successful, or just pretending to be online? Everything feels performative. Everything feels curated. Everything feels fake. And if everything feels fake, how do you find something real enough to believe in? This is why the meaning crisis is worse now than ever before. Because without shared reality, even the idea of meaning becomes subjected, fragmented, lost in the noise. Lastly, we come to the algorithmic hijacking of meaning. This is the final nail in the coffin. We live in an economy that profits off our dissatisfaction. The entire structure of the internet is designed to keep you wanting, scrolling, needing more. Every app, every platform, every algorithm, its job isn't to give you meaning, its job is to keep you engaged. And do you know what the easiest way to do that is? Is make sure you never feel satisfied. Make sure you always feel like you're falling behind, like you're not enough, like there's one more thing you need to do, buy, see, click on before you can rest. The result is a world where people are constantly chasing meaning but never finding it. A world where people mistake engagement for purpose. A world where we confuse being entertained with being fulfilled. And that's how you build an entire generation that feels lost and exhausted at the same time. So here we are. We have no future to believe in. We have too many choices and no idea which ones matter. We don't even share the same reality anymore, and every system we interact with is designed to keep us in a state of perpetual craving. This is why the meaning crisis is happening now. This is why people feel so disconnected, apathetic, and restless. Because in a world where nothing feels real, where the future is a giant question mark, where every choice feels meaningless and everything is designed to distract us rather than fulfill us, what the fuck are we supposed to do? I will get to that, but next we're going to explore some of the symptoms of the meaningless crisis and how we can identify it in ourselves. There's something wrong with us. It's not just stress, it's not just anxiety, it's not just burnout or loneliness or depression or apathy or whatever latest self-help term is trending on TikTok this week. It's something deeper, something bigger. It's the weight you feel in your chest when you wake up in the morning and wonder if anything you do today actually matters. It's the emptiness you try to ignore by scrolling endlessly through your phone looking for something, anything, to make you feel something. It's the quiet dread that hits you at night when the distractions fade and you're left alone with yourself. We've given it different names: mental health crisis, late-stage capitalism burnout, existential malaise, digital fatigue. But those are just symptoms. The disease is something else. The disease is the meaning crisis. And if you really want to understand just how deep this thing goes, you have to look at what it's doing to us. Not just in theory, not just in abstract philosophical terms, but in real life, in how we feel, how we think, how we live, and how we break down. This is how the meaning crisis is fucking us up. You wake up, you check your phone. Bad news. The economy is collapsing. The planet is on fire. Someone got cancelled. Another war, another disaster, another reason to believe the future is nothing but a black hole of suffering and disappointment. So you scroll, you consume, you feel your stomach tighten with stress even though you can't do anything about any of it. And yet, you keep scrolling. Why? Because the internet isn't just an information machine, it's a dread machine. Doom scrolling is what happens when your brain, wired for survival, collides with an infinite feed of fear, outrage, and uncertainty. Every headline, every post, every crisis, it's a tiny hit of anxiety and your brain gets addicted to it. But it's worse than that. Doom scrolling isn't just a habit, it's a coping mechanism for a world that no longer makes sense. People used to have ways to process fear: religion, rituals, community, shared beliefs about the future. Now we have Twitter threads about the next apocalypse. And because there's no meaning attached to any of it, no way to place all this chaos into a larger narrative, people just end up feeling helpless and exhausted. So what do? They scroll more, they consume more, they feed the cycle. Doom scrolling is the opposite of meaning making. It's the passive ingestion of despair. And for millions of people, it's their daily routine. Then there's the idea of self-optimization. It's a distraction. It's a fake purpose. There's a reason self-improvement is a billion-dollar industry. It's because when people can't find real meaning, they settle for the illusion of progress. We live in an era where people are obsessed with optimizing themselves, hacking their habits, tracking their sleep, measuring their productivity, perfecting their bodies. We count steps, optimize workflows, and gamify our personal growth. We treat life like a project, something to be fixed, improved, made more efficient. But the question nobody asks is, what is all this optimization actually for? Because if you really break it down, most of these self-improvement trends are just disguised existential panic. People don't know what to do with their lives, so they focus on making themselves more productive, more disciplined, more efficient. For what? For a career they don't care about, for a future they don't believe in, for a life they secretly feel empty in. This is one of the sneakiest ways the meaning crisis has infected us. It's tricked us into believing that if we just improve ourselves enough, we'll finally feel whole. But you can't optimize your way out of existential dread, because meaning isn't a productivity metric. No amount of habit tracking will tell you what your life is actually about. Then, of course, we have the epidemic of performative living. I'm sure you've noticed how much of life has turned into a spectacle. People don't just do things anymore, they perform them. They don't just go on vacation, they document the vacation. They don't just have relationships, they broadcast them. And they don't just pursue passions, they curate an entire identity around them. Everything is content, everything is staged. Even the things that are supposed to be deeply personal, grief, love, self-reflection, they're now part of the show. And here's why this matters. When your life becomes a performance, you stop living for yourself. You stop asking what actually matters to you, and you start asking what looks good to others. And that is a perfect recipe for existential emptiness. Because meaning has to be real. It has to be felt, not performed. But in a world where we're all watching each other, waiting for validation, waiting for proof that we exist, how many people are actually living for themselves anymore? How many people are chasing real meaning instead of the illusion of meaning that gets them more likes, more followers, more social approval? All of this coalesces into a mental health spiral that nobody knows how to escape. Let's put it all together. The constant doom scrolling, the obsession with self-optimization, the addiction to performance, the collapse of real meaning. What does all of that add up to? Anxiety, depression, burnout, suicidal ideation, chronic stress, digital fatigue, apathy. These are not random, disconnected issues. They are symptoms. They are what happens when you take human beings who are wired to seek meaning and you drop them into a world that strips meaning away from them at every turn. This is why modern mental health feels so unsolvable. Because it's not about individual well-being, it's about a broken cultural foundation. You can go to therapy, you can take meds, you can practice mindfulness, and for a lot of people those things help, but they don't fix the problem. The problem is that people don't know why they're here. The problem is that people don't believe in a future worth looking toward. The problem is that we've built a society that keeps us distracted, fragmented, and disconnected from anything resembling deep meaning. And unless we address that, everything else is just a band-aid on a bullet hole. This is what the meaning crisis is doing to us. This is how deep it's gone. But now you know. I guess the question is, what do we do about it? How do we escape the void? And finally, I'm going to explore that in our next segment. Because it is not enough to diagnose the problem. We need to find a way through it. Let's start with a lie. A lie you've been told your whole life. A lie that has seeped so deeply into your bones that you probably don't even realize you believe it. The lie is this: that if life feels meaningless, it's because you haven't figured yourself out yet. That meaning is something you're supposed to find, like it's hiding somewhere out there in the world, waiting for you to stumble across it. That if you just read the right book, follow the right philosophy, work hard enough, love the right person, or optimize your life in just the right way, then one day everything will click into place. But let me ask you something. How many people do you know who have actually found that? How many people woke up one day finally at peace because they cracked the code? How many people actually escape the void? Not many, because that's not how it works. Meaning isn't something you find, it's something you make. And if you don't understand that, if you keep waiting for the world to give you meaning instead of actively creating it, you will be waiting for the rest of your life. So today, let's stop waiting. Let's figure out how to build meaning for ourselves. Let's figure out how to escape the void. First, we have to stop looking for the one true meaning. This is the first step. Kill the idea that meaning is a singular thing. For most of history, meaning was handed down as a one-size-fits-all solution. You were born into a religion, a tradition, a role. That was your meaning. End of story. But now that's gone. And that's not a bad thing. It's just different. The problem is that most people still think there's one answer, one true calling, one life purpose, one thing they're supposed to do. And when they don't find it, they feel lost. But the truth is that there is no singular meaning to life. There are 1,000 different ways to build meaning, and they don't all have to last forever. You don't need one ultimate purpose, you just need a direction. The best way to escape the void is to stop trying to solve it like a maths problem. Meaning isn't something you figure out, it's something you experiment with. Try things. Go deep into things. Allow yourself to care about something without needing it to be the thing you do for the rest of your life. Because meaning isn't found in a single revelation, it's found in action. The second point, move towards, not away. There's a question that can change everything. A question that most people never ask. And that is, what do you actually want to move toward? Not what you want to escape from, not what you hate, not what makes you anxious. What do you want to move toward? Most people go through life in reaction mode, avoiding pain, avoiding failure, avoiding disappointment. But avoiding things isn't the same as moving towards something meaningful. I hate my job isn't the same as I know what kind of work would feel fulfilling. I don't want to be alone isn't the same as I know what kind of relationships I want to build. I feel lost isn't the same as I know what kind of life I want to create. Escaping the void isn't just about stopping the bad stuff, it's about building something better. And that only happens when you start actively choosing a direction instead of just passively avoiding pain. Find a micro meaning. If you feel like life is meaningless, the worst thing you can do is think bigger. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but people tend to think meaning has to be grand, that it has to be world-changing, revolutionary, or some deeply profound thing. But meaning is most often found in the smallest things. This could be a skill that you're learning, a challenge that pushes you, a creative project that excites you, a relationship you're investing in. This is what I call micro meaning, small, tangible things that give your life structure and purpose right now without needing to be the answer to everything. If you're drowning in existential dread, don't try to solve the entire puzzle, just build a single brick of meaning. Start with one thing that makes you feel alive, even for a moment, and then do it again, and again, and again, until meaning starts to emerge naturally. Engage with something bigger than yourself. Now, the hard truth is that you're never going to escape the void if you only live for yourself. That's not an insult. That's not me saying you should be some kind of selfless saint. It's just a psychological fact. Human beings are wired to find meaning in connection, service, and contribution. That doesn't mean you have to dedicate your life to charity work, but it does mean that if your entire existence revolves around your own personal fulfillment, you will feel empty forever. Find a cause, find a mission, find a community, find a way to give something back. Meaning isn't just what you get from life, it's what you put into it. And lastly, stop worshipping certainty. Most people think that once they find meaning, everything will feel solid, but the truth is that meaning is fragile. Even when you find it, it shifts, it changes, it gets tested. And if you're obsessed with certainty, if you're waiting for some moment where you finally know for sure what your life is about, you will never get there. Escaping the void isn't about certainty, it's about engagement. It's about choosing meaning even when you have doubts. It's about moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. If you wait until you feel 100% ready, you will die waiting. Start now. So, can we escape the void? Yes, but not in the way that you think. Not by finding the perfect answer, not by chasing some ultimate truth. You escape the void by building something inside it, by choosing to care about something even in the face of absurdity, by choosing to act even when you don't feel ready, by choosing to move towards something even when you don't have all the answers. The meaning crisis isn't something that gets fixed, it's something that gets faced. And now you know how to face it. So stop waiting, because meaning isn't something you find, it's something you make. So here we are. We've walked through the wreckage, we've mapped out the void, we've dissected why this world feels like it's falling apart, not just physically, not just politically, but existentially. We've peeled back the layers of why so many people are adrift, drowning in distraction, unable to shake the feeling that something is missing. And now there's just one final question left to ask. Not why is this happening? Not can we escape the void? The real question is this: what kind of life are you going to live now that you know all of this? Because the truth is that most people will hear all of this, nod their heads, feel a deep existential yes reverberate in their chest, and then they go back to scrolling. They go back to waiting for meaning to appear, for purpose to reveal itself, for the world to change before they do. That is how you lose. So before you walk away from this episode, before you let all of this become just another thought experiment, I want you to do something. I want you to make a choice. A real choice, a tangible, concrete, in-the-moment decision. Because in the end, that's the only thing that matters. If you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this: the world will not fix this for you. There is no grand solution coming. There is no cultural shift. There is no technological breakthrough or political movement that will suddenly make existence feel meaningful again. This crisis is not external, it is internal. Yes, the world is chaotic. Yes, the structures that used to provide meaning have collapsed. And yes, we live in an era of distraction, disillusionment, and detachment. But that was always going to happen. Because the truth is that meaning has never been something the world just hands you. People used to believe in gods, in traditions, in great national stories, not because those things were necessarily true, but because they needed them to be. The difference is that now we know that meaning is something we create, and that knowledge is either a death sentence or freedom. If you keep waiting for meaning to be given to you, you will die waiting. But if you understand that meaning is something you actively create, something that requires action, commitment, and choice, then suddenly you are in control. Not of everything, not of fate, not of the chaos of the world, but of how you respond to it. And that's enough. There's a quote from Albert Camus that I keep coming back to. There is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night. Camus understood something that most people never figure out, that the absence of meaning is not an excuse to give up on life. That if the universe is indifferent, that means we are free to create meaning wherever we choose. That the absurdity of existence is not something to be solved, it's something to be embraced. This is what most people don't understand about escaping the void. You don't have to feel like life has meaning before you start acting like it does. You can choose to care, you can choose to commit, you can choose to wake up tomorrow and throw yourself into something, not because it's part of some divine plan, not because it will give you eternal happiness, but because you are alive. And life is better when you give a fuck about something, right? It doesn't have to be big or perfect, it just has to be real. So now we're at the fork in the road. From here you have two choices. The first path, do nothing. You let all of this be another interesting idea, another passing thought. You nod along, maybe even feel a bit inspired, but then you put your phone down and you go back to your usual routine. You distract yourself, you push it all away until the void creeps back in heavier than before. And in a few weeks, maybe a few months, you'll find yourself right back here, listening to another podcast or reading another book or searching for another answer, but nothing will change. Because nothing will change until you do. Which brings us to the second path, the harder path, the path where you actually do something. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be life-altering, but it has to be real. Maybe it means starting something today, a project, a skill, an idea you've been putting off. Maybe it means committing to something outside of yourself, a cause, a relationship, something that forces you to engage with the world. Maybe it means giving up the idea that you need all the answers before you start living. I can't tell you what your next step is, but I can tell you this. If you walk away from this episode without taking action, then you've already lost. Because meaning is not found in thinking about meaning, it is found in living, in doing. So whatever you do after this episode, make it real. Stop waiting, start living, because in the end, that's all that meaning ever really is. So here's my challenge to you. As soon as this episode ends, do something meaningful. Not tomorrow or next week. Do it now. Don't do it because I told you. I'm not your fucking dad. Do it because you're alive. And because you've got a choice in what that means. Now get out into the world and make some meaning. Thank you for spending your time with me today, you beautiful lot. Your presence and attention are always deeply appreciated. You may have noticed that the format is slightly different this episode if you follow along with us every week. It's episode 101, and I thought after the milestone of 100 episodes, I am experimenting with the format, seeing what works. So this may be consistent going forwards, this may not. Who knows? Life is change. I'm going to give you the spiel now, the odd marketing shit that comes at the end of the episode. Here's me shilling you my social media platforms after giving you an episode about the dangers of doom scrolling and the meaning crisis. I'm just going to completely contradict myself and do it anyway. Here we are. So, as always, if anything in this episode has resonated with you in any way, then I would love to hear from you, and I do mean that. That is not just an end of episode marketing fluff. You can share your stories on our beautiful website at theobservingeye.com or on social media. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@theobservingeye and on TikTok, X and Instagram with the handle @theobservingeye as well. And if you're feeling really brave, you can even email me on david@theobservingeye.com. Take care, everybody. Much love. I'll catch you soon.